Okay, so now we're going to do mini lesson 4 about implementation mapping. So implementation mapping is a process which is basically the end goal is to make an implementation strategy. So to kind of design something that's going to help someone take an intervention developed in research world and use it where they're at. Okay, and there's 5 tasks that we're going to go through about how to do this. The first one is a needs and assets assessment. So needs are basically things that might stand in the way that people would need help with to actually start doing a program that they want to do. And facilitators are things that would help. So things they already have access to, okay? So maybe there's a program and it needs computer access, and there's a computer station lab that this community already has access to. That's a facilitator. Barriers might be is that they have patchy Wi-Fi, and so that might be something that needs to be improved before they can actually implement a program. Second is trying to understand who would actually use this program and actually make it happen. So implement is basically like you didn't do it before, now you're going to do it. So you're kind of figuring out all of the things that need to happen to make it go through. And, you know, in the research setting, we have a big team of research assistants, students, the scientists that are thinking through all the steps that need to happen to make sure people get the program that is the part of the intervention. But those people are not going to be out in the real world where people are actually using the tool. So it's kind of like, doesn't directly translate, because you know you don't have the research staff. You need other people to do it, and will they be able to learn how to do it and do it in a way that actually helps people? And then there's different people who make decisions about whether things happen or not. So let's say there's like an intervention for libraries, but the library is thinking of doing like a bunch of different programs. They have to decide which ones to do, which ones they won't do. And there's people who are in charge, and those are the decision makers who decide what those will be. And so being on the same page with those people or convincing those people is important. And then what are things that they need to do the program? So for example, if they have patchy Wi-Fi, who would help them get better Wi-Fi? Is that kind of funding available? Those are usually resources that people would need. And then who, after implementing the program, after starting it out, would actually make it go on? So, you know, starting something new is harder than kind of keeping it going after you've gone into the habit, but then you might get out of the habit and forget about how to do it or not do it as well. So who's going to make sure that that kind of continues? And the second task is, the first one, we're usually using interviews to interview individuals and ask them like, what are things in your community or your organization that make things run smoothly? What are things that get in the way? So you can plan, but then you kind of pick like, okay, they said these are the people that are going to do this thing, and trying to understand who has to do what is the first part of this task too. So performance objectives. Who needs to do something? And what do you expect them to do? In this study that is in the table over here on the right, there's a teacher who's the person who's actually doing the intervention, and the teachers, the implementation outcomes, the teachers have to deliver the intervention to all the students completely. And how will we know whether they did that or not? They need to cover all 6 lessons. They need to use all the program materials. So literally it's getting down to the details of what are they actually doing. And then people do things, but not just like a robot. There are different reasons why they might do it. So those are determinants. Determinants are why would they do it? And those determinants can come from cognitive reasons, means kinds of their thoughts that are in their head. like their attitude, their self-efficacy, whether they believe that they could do it. And then barriers and facilitators are things that can help and things that can get in the way. And then change objectives is what has to change in why someone would do something to lead to that overall goal. So in this example, there is this Long Live Love program is basically education about LGBTQ folks, and someone who is going to do that, why would they do it? Well, if they have a negative attitude, they might not want to do it about LGBTQ. They might feel like, this isn't for me, it's not something, this isn't part of my job, like, why would I do something like this? So that attitude might determine whether or not they actually do it. Even if they're assigned to do it, they might not carry it out. And someone might feel like, oh yeah, it's something I want to do, but I don't feel like I can do it. I'm not confident I could do it. I feel like I would say the wrong word and I would offend someone, and yeah, I can't. So that's that self-efficacy. And then skills. So maybe they don't have the skills to do it, and that can be like a barrier, where it's not really something they're thinking, but whether or not they actually learned how to do something. And then after you've figured that out, like what will they actually do and what will determine whether they do it or not in the intervention, then you go back to that health behavior change theory, and you can think about, okay, I know that this theory looks at self-efficacy makes this behavior happen, and I can design something that helps to increase someone's self-efficacy. So that's where the mapping part is. You've kind of figured out what are the important things that might determine whether or not someone does something, and what theories can I map on. So if I discover everyone has kind of negative attitudes, then, well, I know attitudes are in this theory of reasoned action. And so let me pull out that theory and think about how that might apply, okay? And then there's different implementation strategies that exist, okay? So there's different like kind of categories of things that you can do. Like role modeling can be something that is a tool that people can use to help someone learn the skills that they need. Okay, so someone role models to you skills, and then you practice, and then they give you feedback, and that might be how you learn how to do something. Attitudes can change when you meet people who represent someone who's different from you, and you learn about their humanity, okay? So maybe some of these people with negative attitudes, they spend some one-on-one time with LGBTQ folks, teachers. They might have a change in their attitude, although that's a lot more difficult to change, but it can happen. And so you find those techniques that influence the determinants that you've made. And then you find practical applications, so strategies that were used elsewhere. That's why reading the literature helps, because you know, like, oh, okay, these people use this. That would work perfectly, I feel like, in my kind of scenario. So this is what I'm going to do. And then once you're ready, you produce your implementation protocols and materials. So protocols are basically in research like, what are all the directions? What do I need to know to be able to do this thing? And then what are the materials? Really like the physical things like documents, content. You want to kind of test it out, refine it. And so this is an example from an article I showed you earlier about an implementation study we did in primary care. And they said, you know what, we want these reminders, like these earbuds and wallet cards, because that's going to help us remember. It's going to be a cue to action from that health behavior theory for us to recommend the website to one of our patients. They're going to pick it up and they're going to be like, what's this? That's how they're going to know. Then they said, you know what, we always give parents and teens like this sheet about confidentiality when they walk into the clinic. So we're just going to pair these brochures. You should make some really nice brochures, one for teens, one for parents, and we'll hand them out to everybody. And then they also said, We want this poster on our wall, and we want it to look like more teenager-like. We don't want it to look like cute little thing that is for babies, so the right people will look at it, because there's also babies coming to the office. And then they wanted this email newsletter for them to tell them about our new articles. Okay, so then once you've designed your implementation strategy, you measure and see if it works. So everything about research is measuring a change and seeing whether you've made a difference. And these are some of these outcomes we talked about in that Proctor model. You ask people who are doing the intervention, is it acceptable to them? Adoption, do they take it kind of in equally? Is it appropriate, feasible? Fidelity, do they do it the way you expected them to? How much does it cost them to do it? Penetration, does it get to every kind of part of an organization or just one part? And sustainability, can they keep it going? So this is an example of how we're thinking about doing our study using implementation mapping with 3 different groups of individuals who we think basically, if we took our SOVA website and we let people in the Learn and Earn workforce development programs use it, we imagine they would do these different things. So we haven't done this yet, right? We're just at the beginning of this task 1, where we know that there are people in the community that can be resources about mental health information. And those are advocates for the community. They're trying to make their communities better. They might be an individual, they might be an organization, but we think that's someone who would have a role in our intervention. And then there's work readiness program administrators like Ms. Jenica, who is helping to carry out the program, make sure all the pieces and parts run how they should. And we think that person would have a role in the intervention. And then there are the youth who are low income, many who represent minoritized populations, and they would be the ones who would actually be involved in the program. And the program, like you remember, SOVA Ambassador, is that we have young people write articles about their mental health for the site, okay? And so the first thing that we'll do is interview 10 people in the community, 10 program administrators, and 10 youth, and ask them, what do you think are needs in your community and assets in your community? Have you done mental health stuff before? Has it worked out? Do you think this is something that could be done in your program? If you did it in your program, how would you do it? Who would do what? What do you think would get in the way? Because we want to understand their experiences so that we can make an implementation strategy that would help them to carry out the program, okay? So that's the first step. And this is the part this summer that you were learning about interviewing people so that you can be part of our team that is interviewing folks. And then once we interview them, the next steps will take place after the summer is over. But this is just an example of how it might play out. Like if, just because I wanted to kind of give you that example. So then let's say we identify that the community advocate would be their performance objective, like what we actually felt like that they would be doing would be providing resources and time or guidance to youth about mental health. So they would be someone like that you could go to in the community and say, hey, I'm a youth doing this program. I'm trying to write an article about the resource available in our community. Can I talk to you about it? And what you do in your organization. Then they'll be like, yeah, let me give you an interview. Okay. Then the work readiness program administrator, their task is going to be to regularly work with youth to help them find mental health topics. So the youth have to write, they're going to be reminding them, they're going to be helping them kind of troubleshoot any problems they're having. They're going to help them think about topics to write about. And then the youth are going to be involved in writing at least 1 blog post a month, okay? And they're going to write about topics specific to, many of them might write about topics specific to minority youth, because that's something that's underrepresented on our site, because we've mostly had like Pitt College students writing, and we want to have more representation from people who are not high income and don't have all of the resources to, engage in some things that might help mental health as much as some others might. And so there's a lot of different techniques people have learned who are low income that others could learn from each other about. And so that's going to be what we want them to do. Okay, so then we know what we want people to do. And then the second task, this 2B, is identifying determinants, the why. Why would they do it? Okay, so why would community give resources to youth and talk to them about mental health? Well, maybe it's because they think that this is going to work. They have high outcome expectations of the intervention. Okay, that's their why. The work readiness program administrator, they will work with youth and help them find mental health topics. And maybe what's going to determine whether they do that or not, that they have knowledge about mental health. So if they know about different mental health topics, they're going to say, hey, you should write about stigma. Stigma is something that's really important to whether or not someone wants to get help for their mental health. And then the youth, why would the youth write a blog post? They could just be like, no, I'm not doing this part of learner and it's voluntary, whatever. Well, they might not do it if they don't believe that they know anything about mental health, that they can give anybody any good information. They don't have that self-efficacy around mental health. That they don't, and they might not think people can make a change in their own mental health. They're like, there's nothing you can do. You are the way you are. You're stuck in the life you're in. And then they might also have problems with writing. So they might have writing confidence concerns, like they don't feel like they're a good writer. Okay. So then now we figured out why someone might do the tasks that we want them to do. The next step is how. How are they going to do the task? How are we going to address their why that's kind of getting in the way? And that's where we pull out these theories. So, and implementation theory and strategy. So there's a theory from the Consolidated Framework of Intervention Research called the concept of relative advantage. That sounds complicated. What it is like, do you think something's better than something else? Okay, so if you're like, I want everyone to eat at Wendy's, and they need to think Wendy's is better than Burger King, because right now everyone goes to Burger King. So that's really, it's like there's something better about Wendy's for, that's your goal. Okay, so maybe we want these community advocates to think SOVA is a great intervention. They want to help out. And so they have a good opinion. They think that it's going to work better than other things that might be going on. Okay, then mental health literacy. So there's social cognitive theory that kind of talks about how people learn in communities, in groups, like from each other in social situations. And that might help address kind of people learning about mental health. And then for the youth who need to increase their belief that they can do something, it might be this health belief model. So they might need to change like their attitudes and things like that. That's kind of the theory that maps onto self-efficacy. Then for the writing confidence, there's from this, again, this Consolidated Framework of Intervention or Implementation Research, CFIR, concept of adaptability. That just means that something can adapt, something can change. So like you might have this intervention and it has to work this one way, but maybe you can change something and still like pretty much the same thing. Okay, so now you're going to see how that might work. So then now we know what theories we need, and then how can we practically use those theories to develop an implementation strategy. Okay, so if we want to feel like something is better than something else, then maybe we want these community advocates to really feel like these websites are better. And we want to have like a webinar where we talk to them about, hey, here's what SOVA is, and here's what's wrong with these other things, okay? And then for trying to get program administrators to regularly work with youth to help them find topics, and we want them to improve their literacy, well, they might need training. They might need to learn more about mental health. And then we might want to give them kind of these conversation starters for writing topics, like, hey, here's different things you can kind of use to start a conversation with young people. And then they also might kind of do observational learning and model to the young people how to write about these mental health topics. Okay, and then the last part is these youth who represent the low-income person, okay? So we want them to regularly write a blog post each month. And they might feel like, you know, they're not good at that, or they don't know anything about mental health, and they might feel like they're not confident about their writing. So some things we can do, kind of coming from this health belief model, is we can give them some structured guidance in editing. We can give them some positive feedback. We can be also open. So this concept of adaptability, well, our intervention is only writing, but we could be open to other, I'm sorry, I keep changing. We could be open to other media where we say like, oh, someone could do this video, or someone could do this as like something like completely different. They could like make a song. They could do like photos that represent something to them, or record themselves talking. Maybe we can kind of make sure that certain things are the same, like it's anonymous, which is something important to our site, but that they wouldn't have to write. They could do something different and creative. Okay, so that's basically that idea. And I am done. And thank you for listening.